Hello guys, welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to discuss with you some of the most important commands in the Modify panel of AutoCAD, which is located under this Home tab. Now, this tutorial consists of two parts. In part 1, we will discuss the following commands, along with some practical examples for each case, so you guys can get a very solid understanding on how you use these commands for your own individual cases. So we're going to start off by discussing how to move an object as well as how to copy an object from one place to another. And these two operations are actually a bit similar in nature, so we can just go ahead and discuss it together. So here you can see that I have a bit of a strange looking object which I constructed just for this tutorial. And we'll see how we can move this object to one of these quadrants that you can see over here. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click on this move button. And after that, I'm going to select my entire object, and after that I can simply go ahead and press enter, and now you can see that it's asking me to specify the base point. Now for this particular example, the base point might not actually matter too much. It's just basically going to be the point where you're going to grip your object while you're moving it from the original location to a new place. So for this, I'm just going to go ahead and select this midpoint of the circle to be my base point. And as soon as I do that, you can see that now I'm sort of handling the entire object from that particular point. And I'm just going to simply move it and place it in this quadrant, simply like this. It's just as easy as that. And now we'll see how we can make a couple of copies of this same exact object. So for that, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this copy button. And similar to what I did before, I'm going to go ahead and select the entire object. And after that, I'm going to press enter, and again as the base point I'm going to select this midpoint, and after that you can see that I can place this copy of my original object wherever I want basically. So while I'm doing that, you can see that actually the polar tracking is getting activated with the green color dotted line. So it's basically giving me an indication about a perfect horizontal line so that I can move my object along that, just like this. And I'm going to place it somewhere over here. And even if I place my first object, now you can see that we are not done yet. We can simply go ahead and make another copy in this quadrant as well. And I'm going to tap once on this lowest point of the circle of the second object, just so that I can activate the polar tracking, so that I can move my third object along this line. Another copy right over here. And similarly, I'm going to make my final copy in this final quadrant at this particular location as well. And once you're done with everything, you can simply hit enter. And finally, this is how it looks. So that's about it for copying and moving objects. And let's move into the next command that we're going to discuss, and that's how to work with arrays. So the array command is a bit similar in nature to the copy command, but it's more powerful in the sense that it can create copies of objects arranged in a pattern, which can either be rectangular, polar, or even an array of objects along a specified path. Now for this demonstration, I'm going to pick the first two styles that I mentioned, which are rectangle and polar. And as you can see, I have my object right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this flyout menu of this array button, so that from here we can pick this rectangular array command, which basically distribute the object copies into combination of rows and columns and even levels. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And after that, I'm going to select my object simply by highlighting like this. And after that, I will press enter. And you can see that it automatically generated an array which consists of 3 rows and 4 columns using the object that I had over here. And let's say if you would like to make a change to this array. And right over here, you can actually see an indication of the number of columns and the rows. So let's say if I happen to change these columns from 4 to about 6, and if I hit enter, you can see that 2 more columns appeared, and similarly I can even make a change to the number of rows as well. Let's say if I were to just only put 2 rows and hit enter, you can see that the top row disappeared. These 4 items, I guess it's quite self-explanatory. It's basically adjusting the distance between the items, and in this case it's actually the distance between the columns, and over here it's the distance between the rows. And now if I hit enter, you can see that I successfully managed to create an array of objects which consists of 6 columns and 2 rows. Now what happens if I were to select one of these objects? You can see that the entire set of objects actually get selected. And that's because I had the associative button clicked under the array options panel. Now, if I were to undo this and go back to my single object, and if I were to execute this array command again, I would go ahead and select my object and press enter. And if I change this to be 6 and 2, and if I deselect this associative button and close the array, and now if I were to select one of the objects, and now you can see that the different objects which form my array are actually not sort of merged together. I can simply go ahead and select an object of my preference just like this without it automatically selecting all the objects which created the array. Alright, now let's see how this polar array command works. So for that, I'm going to open up this flyout menu and I'm going to select polar array. And as you can see, what this polar array command does is it's actually evenly distributing the copies of the object in a circular pattern around a specified point or a specified axis of rotation. So I'll just go ahead and click on this. And after that, I will select my object again and hit enter. And now you can see that it's asking me to specify the center point of the array. Now for this, I would like to select my 0, 0 origin as the center point. So I can either go ahead and click over here, or I can manually enter the coordinates as well. So I'm going to enter 0 over here and I'll press tab, and after that enter 0 again. And now you can see that around 0, 0 it actually created a circular pattern using a multiple number of copies of this original object that I had over here. Now similar to the rectangular arrays, we can actually still make changes to this pattern as well. Now if you see over here, you can see that the number of items, and I can simply change that. Let's say if I were to go with only 4 items, I can change it to 4 and hit enter. And now you can see that the number of items changed to 4. And I can even increase that. Let's go with 10 items, and it's going to basically increase the number of items. And you can see that just because of the way how my object looks, let's say if we assume this part to be the front part and this yellow color hatched part to be the back part, you can see that as it goes around an imaginary circle, it's actually changing its direction as well, isn't it? So that's happening automatically because we have selected this rotate items button. But if you were to deselect that, you can see that all the objects, they start facing towards just one direction. And if you think that the radius of this imaginary circle across which each of these items are actually being placed, if you think that the radius is too high, you can even make changes quite simply. Let's say if I were to click on this object and I can adjust the radius just like this. And to apply all your settings, you can simply go ahead and click on this close array button, and that'll basically apply all your settings. And if you would like to make any further changes, all you have to do is just simply click on this array of objects. And if you hover your mouse pointer over here, you can see that there's an option called stretch radius. And from that, you can actually make changes to the original radius, which in this case, which happens to be about 8109. And if you click on the stretch radius, you can see that you can either manually enter a number, or you can simply use your mouse pointer in order to adjust the radius, and it dynamically changes as you change your mouse pointer just like this. So let's say I would like to set a value of about 15,000 units. And similarly, if you hover your mouse pointer over here, you can see that the angle between the objects are now 36 degrees. Now you can manually change that as well, simply by clicking over here once. Well, you can change that from here as well. Let's say if I were to reduce this angle between the objects to be about, let's say 15 degrees, and now if I hit enter, you can see that now having 15 degrees between each object, it's not really able to complete a full circle, isn't it? So all the objects will get stacked in this kind of a manner. And it's not really a complete circle anymore, because you cannot really have a complete circle with this number of objects having 15 degrees as the angle between each other. So that's something to keep in mind. Alright, so that's about it for polar and rectangular arrays. Now let's move on to talk about scale and rotate commands. Now again, similar to the previous examples, I have my object right over here. Now, in order to scale up or down the size of my object, I can simply go over here. Now, I think it's quite straightforward. What the scale command does is it's actually either enlarging or reducing the size of the object. So I'll just go ahead and click on that button, and after that, I will select my object, and then I will go ahead and select the base point to be the center of this circle. And as soon as I do that, you will see that my object gets actually scaled up massively. Now if you want to rescale your object, let's say twice the size of what you had before, all you have to do is just simply type 2, and if you press enter, you will see that your object gets scaled twice the size of what it was before. Similarly, if you would like to reduce the scale, all you have to do is again go to the scale command, select your object, press enter, specify the base point, and let's say this time I would like to create a new object that's scaled down by a factor of 0.25. So I will type that, and after that I'll press enter, and now you can see that my original object got scaled down by a factor of 0.25. So that's how that scale command works. So I'm going to maybe put this back to a scale of double of its size. So I'll set my factor to be 2, and I'll get my object like this. And that's about it for scale. And now let's see how we can work with the rotate command. Now again, the rotate command is right over here in the modify panel of the home tab. And what it does is it's basically rotating the object around a specified point. So I'm going to select my object like this, press enter, and select the point that's actually going to work as the base point, and that's actually going to be the point around which your object will get rotated. So I'm going to set the center of my circle to be the base point in this case. And after that, you can quite nicely guide the rotation just like this, and you can set the rotation angle manually. Now, because I have turned on this polar tracking right over here, and if I quickly open that up, you can see that I have set my polar tracking to get activated at these angles: 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135 degrees, 180 degrees, and so on. And that's the reason when I move my mouse cursor around this, you can see that the polar tracking actually gets activated automatically at these particular angles, like 0 degrees over here, 45 degrees over here, and it should get activated at 90 degrees as well. And right over here, 135, 180, and so on. So you can either use those guidelines generated through polar tracking to aid your rotation process, or you can simply, let's say if you would like to specify an angle manually, let's say about 35 degrees, all you have to do is just enter that angle over here, and when you press enter, you can see that your object gets rotated accordingly. Alright, now let's move on to the next command, and that's the offset command. So this offset command is actually one of the most frequently used commands in AutoCAD. And this command is largely used to create things like parallel lines, concentric circles, and even parallel curves. Now I'm going to demonstrate this to you guys by showing you how we can add an offset to this vertical line that you can see over here. So similar to what we have done so far, if you want to access the command, you can go over here to this modify panel. And right over here, you will see the offset command, and you can click on the offset command once. And now over here, you can see that we have to specify an offset distance. So I'm going to specify my offset distance to be, let's say about 3000 units. And then we have to specify the object which we can use as a reference when creating these offsets. And for my case, that's going to be this particular line. And now you can see that if I hover my mouse to the right side, before even I click, you can see that it's actually giving me the indication where the offsetted line is going to be. But if I hover my mouse over to the left side, you can see that the offset line is going to be on the other side. And if you click once, you will see that the offsetted line actually appeared right over here. And if I click on that object again, it creates an exact copy of that line parallelly with the distance that's equal to what I just specified on the right side of that second object in this manner. And if I click, we have another line just like this. So this is actually a very quick and easy way of making multiple copies, especially when we are talking about lines. But the way how this tool works for other objects might be a bit different. For example, if we talk about a circle, let me go ahead and create a circle like this. And now if I take the offset tool and if I specify the offset distance to be, let's say 2500 in this case, and now if I select the circle, you can see that of course the circle that gets drawn within that circle is actually kind of a scaled down version. So the radius of that circle is actually going to be 2500 units less than the original circle. And similarly, if I hover my mouse outside the circle, you can see that we get a much bigger circle with a higher radius, which is having a radius of 2500 units more than the original circle. And similar to what I demonstrated here, we can actually keep on drawing circles like this. And at some point of time, if you want to change the radius from 2500, let's say, to 5000 units, now there's a distance of 5000 units between these two circles, as we can see over here. Alright, so to conclude everything, we can right click and select enter, or you can simply hit enter as well. And right over here, what I have is a very simple illustration of a part of a floor plan. And let's say I would like to create a wall by adding one more line of a constant thickness that actually runs parallelly to this outer boundary that you can see over here. And just keep in mind that this object is actually of the type polyline. And all I have to do is simply go to this offset tool and specify the offset distance. Another way to specify the offset distance instead of typing it in is actually, let's say if you would like to graphically specify the offset distance to be maybe from this point, let's say up to somewhere over here, you can specify the distance simply by indicating that distance in this manner as well. And if I click over here, now it records that particular distance to be the offset distance. And then if I click on this object and hover my mouse towards the inner region, you can see that the offsetted line appeared, so that we don't even have to draw the lines one by one manually. But something to keep in mind is that, let's say if somebody drew the same exact shape using this line command, something like this. Just going to draw it quite roughly. Let me touch at this point so that I can get the object snap tracking. And now you can see that these lines are actually not sort of merged together, or it's not joined together. So these are actually individual line objects. And now if you try to apply the same concept of offsetting, let's say I would specify the distance similar to what I did before. And now if I select the object, you can see that the offsetted lines are actually appearing one by one. Now that's going to be actually a lot of work for us, because we have to extend these lines to meet these two together. And we have to get rid of some of the intersecting lines, just like this, for example. So that's going to be actually a lot of work, isn't it? So what we can do is click on this flyout menu, and there's another command called join. So what this does is, this is actually joining all the individual lines together to create one single polyline. And when I hit enter, it will join all the objects together. And now if I click on this, you can see that everything gets selected all together. And now we can apply the offset command just like what we did before. Specify the distance, and after that, when you click on the object, you can see that the offsetted line gets appeared just like this. So that's about it for offset command. And now let's talk about the mirror command. Now using the mirror command, you can create mirrored copies of your desired objects. And you have to keep in mind that if you want to mirror an object, we have to do that always with reference to a certain point. And that point could be a point on that object itself, or it could even be an arbitrary point somewhere outside in the space. And depending on how you select that point, your mirrored result will be different in terms of its placement. The object itself, the dimensions and the sizes of that original object itself is not going to change. Just the location where it gets placed will be different depending on how you select your point. To activate the mirror command, we can go over here to this button over here in the modify panel and click on that, and I'll select my object like this. And after that, I will press enter, and now you can see that we have to specify the first point of the mirror line. Now let's say I would like to make a copy, a mirrored copy of this object somewhere over here with a specified distance. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first hit the midpoint of this arch, and I'm going to drag my mouse pointer somewhere over here. And let's say that this is the point that I would like to use as the reference point when I'm creating the mirrored object. So the distance between this reference point and the midpoint of that arch of the chair is going to be exactly same as the distance between this reference point and the midpoint of this chair as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click over here. And now you can see that the polar tracking gets activated, which I can use as a guide when I'm placing my mirrored object. And let's say if I were to use this 90 degrees guideline to place my object, and if I left click now, you can see that it prompts me a question asking whether I would like to erase the source object or not. And if you say yes, this source object will get erased and it will be only this mirrored object over here. But if I say no, both the objects actually will remain in my drawing, just like this. So that's a quick demonstration of how the mirror command works. And now let's talk about the trim command. Alright, so the trim command you can access from here. Something quite important is that the way how you're going to be able to trim your object, or well, in this case, the parts of the objects, are going to be directly related to the way you're selecting your objects. Now, for example, if I were to select all of my objects over here, you can see that I have 3 lines. And after that, if I press enter, and now if I hover my mouse pointer over here, you can see the part that's actually going to get trimmed. Now, just because this horizontal line and this vertical line happens to intersect, we have the freedom of trimming out all of these 4 parts, as we can see over here. And the same goes for this horizontal line and this vertical line as well. I can trim any of these parts just because I happen to select all of these objects together. But now let's see what happens if I were to select, let's say if I activate the trim command. And after that, if I were to select only this horizontal line and only this vertical line, and now if I hit enter, because I did not select this particular vertical line, it's considering this part of the line to be actually a continuous line, in which case I cannot trim only this mid part of that line. If I try to trim this line, you can see that this entire line gets trimmed. And finally, if that's what you want, you can simply click like this, and that actually doesn't stop the tool. You can keep on trimming parts of the object further as well. So if I want to maybe get rid of this part, I can do that as well. And finally, when I'm done, I can hit enter, and this is how the trimmed object looks. And now let's see how we can use this trim command with a bit of a practical application. Now over here, you can see that I have divided this area into 2 different rooms. But when I'm specifying the wall, I have some unwanted lines over here. I would like these 2 lines to be actually continuous without having a line segment right over here. And the same goes for this area as well, and over here and here as well. So I'm going to use the trim command to get rid of that. And after that, I'm going to actually create an opening somewhere over here so that we can create a door to connect these 2 rooms. And we can do that quite simply using this trim command. So first, let's go ahead and click the trim command. And after that, we can select all the lines just like this and hit enter. And now what we need to get rid of is simply this and this line segment. And in this case, what I don't need is this one and this line segment. And over here in the middle, I have to select these 2 lines as well. So I'm going to press escape and I'm going to take the trim command again, select everything, hit enter. And now quite easily I can get rid of these 3 lines. And right over here, I'm going to press escape and do the process again. Get rid of this one, and this one. And now, if you want to create an opening over here, there are actually multiple ways of doing that. And the way that I'm going to do that is simply aimed at demonstrating the capabilities of this trim command to you guys. So I'll actually create a temporary construction line just like this. And let's say I would like to have a distance of 11,500 units, for example, for the opening of my door. So I'm going to take this offset command and I'm going to type the distance to be 11,500, and I'm going to select this line and I'm going to create an offset line over here on this side. And now what we can do is we can simply go ahead and take the trim command, select everything like this, press enter, and you can get rid of these unwanted lines just like this. And you can see that now we have created an opening where we can actually fit a door that opens either to this side or to this side. Eventually can connect these 2 rooms. And similarly, we can actually add a door to somewhere over here as well, because we need a connection from these rooms to this side as well. But I guess you guys get the idea how to utilize the trim command to actually do things like this. So that was quite straightforward. Now let's move on to the final tool that we are going to discuss in the first part of this tutorial, and that's going to be the extend command. Alright, so since we just used the trim command, if you want to access the extend command, you actually have to go over to this trim command and you have to click on this flyout button, and that'll actually show you this extend command. That's how you're going to access it, or you can simply opt to type it out as well. So what this extend command does is, quite frankly, it's self-explanatory, but what it does is it's actually extending objects to meet another object. It's very important to keep in mind the fact that you have to always extend an existing object using the position of another object as a reference, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this extend button. And as you can see over here, I have some unfinished construction lines. What I basically aim to do with these construction lines is to actually create one wall in this orientation and another wall in this orientation, so that I can simply segment this region into two different rooms. And I'm going to use these unfinished lines to begin with, and my intention is basically to extend this line to this corner and extend this line to this corner and this line to this corner, so that it will actually meet this object. Now in this particular case, if I talk about this horizontal line over here, I would like this line to touch this particular vertical line that you can see over here. So the first object that I need to select is that. So I'm going to select this object like that. If I press enter, and now if I touch this line, and you can see that it's actually showing the extension of that particular line all the way up until the border. And something interesting is that, let's say if we can assume the midpoint of this particular line to be somewhere over here, as soon as I'm hovering my mouse pointer before the midpoint, you can see that it's actually always showing me its extension to the right side. But as soon as I cross the midpoint, you will see that it's actually showing me its potential extension towards the left side. So in this case, what I would like to do is I would like to extend this line towards the right side. So I'm just going to simply click on the right side of its midpoint, and that'll sort of take care of this extension just like this. And the same goes for these two lines as well, because I have marked out my boundary, or the object to which I would like to get this line extended to is going to be this particular object. So if I hover my mouse pointer over here, you can see that it's going to extend until it touches the border, and the same goes to this part as well. And now we basically have some construction lines that we can use for the wall. And now I'm going to hit enter, and the rest will be simply using other commands like offsetting and cutting the parts out, which we just discussed, in order to create some opening to connect these two rooms, and maybe add an opening to connect this room and this outer area as well. That concludes the first part of this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we actually discussed quite a number of important commands of this modify panel that we have to quite frequently use when we construct drawings. And I hope what we discussed today was clear for you guys. And if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to add them down below, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And stay tuned for the second part of this tutorial, because we are going to discuss another set of important commands of this modify panel. What we are going to discuss in the second part of this tutorial is going to be just as important as what we discussed just now, which will also make your life easier when you're creating drawings using AutoCAD. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you with the part 2 of this tutorial.